And that pretty much wraps up all of the recent Spurs talk, guys. So there is a little bit that we're going to dive into today that is kind of the draft. We're not going to go super deep. I've barely even really dove into these guys. These are just more names in the draft range that we will be picking in positions of need. So again, very baseline here, but the first thing that we'll do is we'll just go ahead and update where the Spurs look like in the standings here. Where is the standings?
Go
I don't know.
to NBA
There
stand.
we go. We'll figure it out. Yeah. Normally it's up there, but that is the East there. Here are the Spurs. They will probably soon have an E next to their name as well. Uh, they are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The Spurs have the 8th worst record in the NBA as of right now. And again, the plan is essentially out of the question now for the Spurs. So what we're going to do here is we're going to jump over to Tankathon.
Hmm.
And you guys can see they have the Spurs at 9 right now. So I think because of Chicago having one more loss, we're actually down there. Missed that. But because Chicago is in the play-in, you would think that they would be ahead of this or below the Spurs. But yeah, let's go ahead and do a lottery sim here. So this is a really
Oh,
good one
wow.
for the Spurs. Yeah, I did one earlier today where the Spurs got number 2 as well. So there's always that chance, but let me do another one here to get something a little bit more realistic. Yeah, so here's the Spurs down at 9. They're probably going to be anywhere from that 7 to 9 range if we're just being completely realistic. Maybe, if we can have some more NBA shenanigans going on that we've been seeing over the past couple months, if just some strings are pulled behind the scenes, maybe we could jump into the top 3, but in all likelihood, we will probably be more kind of in this range right here. And then the other thing with Atlanta winning more games, that is going to solidify the other pick for the Spurs outside of the lottery at 16 right now. But obviously we'll have to wait and see how the rest of the season goes to see exactly where that Atlanta pick ends up being solidified. But as you guys can see, that's pretty much the gist of where the Spurs are at in the draft. So I went ahead and I was going to do top 5, but I ended up coming up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different draft prospects that the Spurs could pick at either of these spots. And when we go into them here, I'll kind of go over, whether they would be at 9 or at 16. But let's go ahead and go to some of these guys' ESPN pages. So the first person that we will look up is Khaman Maluach. I'm totally butchering his name. I'm not going to act like I pronounced it right, but I'm doing my best to pronounce it as we now have him on the screen here, Ethan. Or screen, excuse me. This season for Duke, he's averaging 8 points and 7 boards, but don't be fooled by that. He's had a 19 and 10 game, and obviously he's playing on the most talented team in the country, so that kind of affects his numbers. But he, in my opinion, is probably the number 1 ranked center. And in most of the big boards, it's either him or Derik Queen are the first. So definitely one of the biggest names playing on one of the best teams in college basketball. And another thing I didn't know about him, Ethan, played on the South Sudan FIBA team in the FIBA World Cup last year. So has some FIBA experience as well. He's been playing FIBA since he was about 14 years old. But the biggest thing, 7'2", 250, run, jump, and dunk center.
I like him on paper for sure. I'm going to admit I have not watched a single Duke basketball game this year. I was anticipating, or I was planning on watching them in March Madness, especially without Cooper Flag. Obviously, I've heard of the Big Duke Center. That's what everyone calls him, the Big
Mm-hmm.
Duke Center. The Spurs should draft the Big Duke Center. This is obviously him. I'd like to see how he does in March Madness without his number 1 player. See if he elevates his game offensively, or if he just continues to be a run, dunk, and jump center. Run, jump, and block, dunk, center, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, I'm fine with drafting him. I just think that his potential and upside we might get a better glimpse of without Cooper Flag to kind of lean on offensively.
Yeah, he is very young. He's a freshman, so I believe he's 18, 19. They don't have his age here. That may be just because we're on the college page, but I know sometimes a lot of guys from the African countries. I know like Thon Maker, there was a dispute about his age
Yeah.
for a little bit, but I'm pretty sure Khaman Maluach is 18 now that I think about it, because when I was watching some of the FIBA highlights, they were mentioning how they
Yep, he's
knew
18.
when he was 14. So yeah, no age disputes here for Khaman. But here's the bigger thing, Ethan: 8 points, 10 rebounds, 9 rebounds, 9 rebounds, 9 rebounds, 14 rebounds, 1 block, 4 blocks, 2 blocks, 2 blocks. Again, like you said, we're going to get a better look at his upside in the NCAA tournament. I think those high pressure situations tell a lot. And ideally, Duke will be around for a while. Another thing you mentioned, I could be wrong on this, so y'all correct us in the comments. We're just college basketball ignorant, to be completely honest with you. But I believe Cooper Flag is going to be okay for the tournament.
I don't
So
think so.
because he was out for the ACC tournament, like the conference
Oh,
tournament.
maybe that's what I saw.
Yes, he did get hurt, and he hurt his ankle, and he was ruled out for the ACC tournament. But for March Madness, I believe he might be back. I
Okay,
could I
hopefully
could
that's
be
true.
wrong. I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure that they did announce that he would be okay for March Madness.
Fingers
Um,
crossed.
yeah, but even if he is out, Ethan, I think it would only be like 1 or 2 games. Like if and with how good Duke is, like they were able to still win the ACC tournament, even without him. I
Right.
think they'll advance long enough to see him play again. But anyways, that's deep in the weeds. The point is, the Spurs need a backup center that can block shots, get rebounds, and
Yep,
just guard the interior. This is exactly that mold.
for sure. I'm completely behind this pick.
Let's go ahead and move on to the next one that I would also be okay with. And now I'd heard a little bit about this guy, Ethan, but when I watched him, I was a little bit surprised with what I saw. And as you can kind of see here on the right, we're going to pause it so we don't get any copyright stuff. But you see Derik Queen cashes a 3 for Maryland. You see that highlight down there. He
Mhm.
was actually taking things off the dribble and shooting a lot more than I thought. Now, granted,
14%.
that yeah, not that great on the season, obviously. But most of what I saw was this Michigan game here, so you see the 3 point percentage there. So again, not something that was super consistent, but he did go for 31, and even other than the shooting, Ethan, just the way that he took the ball off the floor, like he was actually crossing people up at like
Mhm.
250 and driving to the rim and kind of like making like an acrobatic layup. Now, he's 245, almost 250 pounds. So he can still go play, big and be physical in the interior. But he actually kind of has like some sauce to him, a little bit of handle. But it's kind of the same story here, Ethan, as you can see: 19 and 10, 10 and 10, 17 and 12, 23 and 6.
Mhm.
He's Maryland's best player as well. 16 and 9 on the season. But yeah, that's what I would say about Derik Queen.
Numbers look great. Again, I haven't watched a single Maryland just possession, not let alone a game. He is 6'10", so I'm curious. I will be watching March Madness as well, so I'm curious to see how his size matches up against some of the bigger players, and if he's still able to get to that 9 boards a game mark. Because as much as it would be great to have a guy that can handle the ball and play the 5 position, we kind of have that in Victor Wembanyama. So if you ask me right now, with very little information, Derik Queen or my guy from South Sudan, the big Duke center. I don't remember his name. I think I take the big Duke center.
100%. I'm on that same boat as well. I would much rather go with Khaman Maluach. But I'm not opposed to this at 9. But you made a really good point there, Ethan, because this Michigan game, there's another guy on this Michigan team. I'm going to go ahead and pull up their roster, and this would be a guy that the Spurs would probably pick at 16
Mhm.
more than 9, depending on how it goes. But their center, Danny Wolf, is also rated as a first round center, and I brought him up as a potential draft prospect. And when he matched up with Derik Queen, he's a 7-footer. Derik Queen only had 3 rebounds where he had 21 and 14.
Ooh.
Now, I will say I did see a nice block that Derik Queen had on Danny Wolf, but honestly, looking at this game, they both had pretty good matchups, and it seems like Danny Wolf got the better of him. So maybe if Maluch, or we're totally butchering his name, y'all can correct us. I'm sorry. We're
I
just
just
going to
call
be
him Come On. Is that his
we're
name, right?
yeah, come on. The Duke Center. We'll just go
The
with
big Duke
that.
center.
Yeah, the big Duke Center. Oh my goodness. If he's already taken and you don't want to go with Derik Queen, here's somebody else that you could maybe go with later in the draft. But he's not the only option at center, Ethan. Another one is a guy from Georgetown, and let me pull him up. He is also ranked kind of in that teen range, kind of where we're at. Spelled his name wrong. Excuse me. There we go. And he is also another 6'10 guy, but he's a little bit bigger than Derik Queen. And I would say that his play style is a little bit more of, towards the basket. He's not taking the ball off off the dribble or anything like that. But you do kind of see less rebound numbers from him overall, as much as
Mm.
he was able to contribute in the paint.
I do like the idea of a Georgetown big. I mean, it says forward, not center, so maybe he's more of a four in the modern NBA. I'm not sure. I haven't watched a single play. But Georgetown has developed some real solid big men historically, maybe not recently. But I'm thinking back to Patrick Ewing and what's his name? Alonzo Mourning, just to name
Mm-hmm.
two guys. Like I like the idea of him, but again, haven't watched any play.
Right. This is honestly the reason we're bringing all these guys up, because we don't have the in-depth analysis on them right now. These are just names that you can watch of like, okay, here's who, like Danny Wolf and Thomas Sorber. Those are some potential bigs that we could get at 16 or 17, depending on how the rest of the season shakes out. If we go with somebody else, best player available
Hmm.
at 9. But then again, depending on how that goes. If the Duke Center is available, great. And here's another thing that I was thinking about too, Ethan. If we're really sold on like the Duke Center, then we can package these picks to move up as well if we want to too.
We could certainly try. Looking at the lottery, though, I don't know if anybody would necessarily want to trade down because everyone sucks in front of us. Like the only guy that I could see maybe trading down would be the Philadelphia 76ers because they're
Hmm.
obviously in a completely different place than the rest of the guys on the lottery. Um, Otherwise, I think it might be tough,
Yeah.
at least with just the 16 and 9 theoretically.
Yeah. We might have to throw in more. That's a good point. And that gets into free agency as well.
Hmm.
Maybe because the Spurs always go best available. So if they go with two guards, then maybe free agency is the only option. But I just hope that in some form or fashion the Spurs address the backup center position, whether it's in the draft or free agency or both. I don't care, just something.
Right. I'd prefer the draft because the free agent pool is it's either real
Okay.
top heavy or it's real bottom heavy. There's not a lot of like in between guys that that I think would um, you know, push the needle a little bit.
You want to hear something funny?
What?
I'm more unaware than I have been over the past couple years of the free agency class this season because I didn't get 2K this year.
Mm. No, that definitely helps when you think about,
You know?
for sure.
Because if I'm playing my GM a lot, I can look, okay, I know who's going to be in the free agency class this year. So
Cap space, who has it, who doesn't. I'm with you, dude.
I'm glad you brought that up because, like I said, I was kind of ignorant of that. So that pushes me towards the draft even more as well. So out of all the centers, there's 4 names we got on here: Derik Queen, Khaman Maluach, Thomas Sorber, and Danny Wolf. Thomas Sorber and Danny Wolf are lower. Derik Queen and Khaman Maluach are higher up. The other names that I will come up with here, Ethan, we are going to wrap up in just a little bit, but there is one other name that I will
Mm,
bring up here: Asa Newell from the Georgia Bulldogs. He is not a center, but he is. They list him at 6'11 here. I've seen some other sites that list him at 6'10. And he definitely would be, a 4. But he's got a lot of potential. I've just seen a lot of mocks where they've had the Spurs there. If the Spurs don't go with a center at 9, I'm very happy with him here. Again,
mhm.
I'm not super in depth whenever it comes to Asa Newell knowledge, but I know he's a pretty versatile player. From what I've seen him at Georgia, he's definitely the heart and soul. He was a very highly rated player. I know he's one of the highest Georgia recruits that they've had in a while there, averaging 15 and 7 in a really solid SEC this season. I mean, this is a super tough SEC. And again, I'm excited to see how he does in the tournament as well.
Yeah, I actually do know this name, and I do know a little bit about him. I do know he's very versatile, like you're saying, and I know he's a solid defender with upside as a scorer. And I know he's only shooting 30% right now, but I think that everyone anticipates that will only improve. Um, I don't want to shoehorn him into a Jeremy Sohan bill because I do think that they're different kinds of players. But I think coming into the NBA, they might have similar starts
Yes.
to one another. And the only worry I have about drafting an Asa Newell is that he would pretty much be off the bench. And depending on whether or not we bring back Harrison Barnes, that might even minimize his minute. I think we have to bring back Harrison Barnes, excuse me, but I think that might minimize his minutes even more. Um, and I'm not sure the Spurs want to do that. I'm not sure he wants to do that because immediate impact would be less than, say, drafting the big Duke center or, a really, really solid point guard if Chris Paul decides to leave, something like that.
As much as he'd be in the 8 and 9 range, dude, honestly, like to your point, that is the biggest negative is that this would kind of be redundancy, positionally. And I mean, when you're talking about that, I'm thinking like we might even play in Austin, to start. Just because of the amount of guys that we have. I know that's crazy to think of was drafting somebody that high, but
Hmm.
just because of, like you said, Harrison, Jeremy. But he could be somebody, that could definitely outpace a Julian, but that then comes in, the shooting question. Again, we haven't watched that much of these guys to know, but the one thing I did want to point out in his last game in the SEC tournament, he did have 17 rebounds.
I've seen that.
Um,
Yeah.
and had 9 rebounds against Florida as well in a win. Florida is, I mean, they might win the national championship. They just won the SEC tournament. Um, so he has shown some rebounding ability with his size, despite not being a true center. I think this would definitely be an upside pick if like Maluach is already picked.
And like I said, I'm not mad at it. If we draft him at 9 and then at 16 we're able to get one of those guys that you were talking about, I forget his name, but the 7-footer from
Danny Wolf.
Michigan, Danny Wolf, or even Sorber, then like I'm behind it, and maybe we can go out and find us a quality backup center in free agency because he is very versatile, and I think in a year or two could prove to be very, very valuable. I think it would just be a real test of the coaching staff to try and figure out where he fits in the rotation, especially only shooting 30%. You don't necessarily want to play him next to Jeremy and a big, right? You kind of have to find a niche for him.
Yeah. 100%, 100%. We got a hard stop today, guys, so we will catch y'all in the next one. I will mention Noah Asenge. He is a 6'8 forward who kind of would be redundant in the Jeremy sense, but from France, somebody you could eye in that 16 point or that 16 range. And then Nolan Traore, another point guard from France. We've kind of heard about them a little bit.
Mm.
That would be another name. If you get the Duke center in the first one, I would definitely be down with picking Traore at 16 as kind of an upside pick to maybe replace Blake Wesley.